Hi folks, welcome to Crisco's Corner. Unfiltered commentary. And that's your truth, the real truth. Please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thank you for your support. Hi folks, welcome back. From National Review. When does Trump get his apology? Well, I wouldn't hold my hand on my ass to wait. Let's read on. Biden's record on COVID shows how preposterous the over-the-top critiques of Trump were. The fullness of time and how the Omicron wave has made it obvious that preposterous, over-the-top, and unfair chief lines of criticism against Donald Trump were during the pandemic. I'll continue to say it. Without the COVID hitting the country when it did, Trump would have won. It has been said over and over that Trump almost single-handedly killed thousands upon thousands of Americans. Well, as they announced today, no criminal charges against former governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, even though his orders kill over 15,000 seniors, you get crickets. Chris Hayes, a couple of months ago, called for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission-type inquiry into how Donald Trump willfully got hundreds of thousands of people killed. Willfully. Whoopi Goldberg opted in that this has blood on his hands. During one of the presidential debates last year, Biden said of Trump, anyone who is responsible for that many deaths should not remain as president of the United States. Well, President Biden, I accept your resignation. Why then does Biden get to stay in office? Because the Democrats worked in dovetail with media, cable news, social media, Hollywood, the vast majority of our university, if not all of them, education in general. That's why. Tragically, about as many people have died of COVID this year as in 2020. This doesn't make for a apples-to-apples comparison. Biden only took office late January, and any policy changes would take time to show up in real-world results, but speaks to how neither a Republican nor Democratic president has been able to stop the plague. Yep, it's like blaming somebody for rain outside. And, of course, you can critique anybody. It was a pandemic that nobody could see would cause this much harm. Not at all, because the way China hit it. And when it hit the U.S., it hit with a vengeance. What are you going to do? Put a wall around the whole country? Well, Trump would have done it if you let him. You wouldn't even let him put a wall on the southern border. And which, by the way, the hundreds of thousands just in the last few months of unlawful immigrants, none of them were checked for COVID. They were just turned loose on the general public. So who should resign? Indeed, if you simply look at the progression of cases and deaths in the U.S. over time, you'll have no idea that a president promising a radically new approach took office in January 2021. The peaks and troughs had proceeded in keeping with the seasons, the emergence of variants and other underlying conditions. That line from Biden, there's a Freudian slip. The line from Biden in the debate, by the way, wasn't a one-off. It was one of his main campaign themes of his presidential election. If this president is reelected, you know what will happen by instead of Trump. In his acceptance speech to the Democratic Convention last year, cases and deaths will remain far too high. He continued, just look around. It's not this bad in Canada or Europe or Japan or almost anywhere else in the world. As I pointed out in a column Political last week, though, the U.S. has had more cases on a per capita basis than Europe, Canada, and Japan this year in 2021, and more deaths. Is that Joe Biden's fault this year, the way it was Donald Trump's last year? There are obviously legitimate criticisms of Trump on COVID, from the initial testing snafu to his extreme repeated over-promising that when the virus would disappear, to his hostility to masks when they were whatever their shortfall is a better option than lockdowns to his generally wild, poorly informed statements. That's all true, by the way. And I'm a big Trump guy. But none of those produce mass death. Unless you believe you could have tested and traced the virus into oblivion at the outset, which seems unlikely given the scale of the outbreaks here. On the other side of the ledger, Trump helped develop the viruses, a world historical event. All true. A Democratic defense of Biden is that the COVID response had been sabotaged by Republicans refusing to get vaccinated. This is no doubt part of the story. But is the pandemic worse than 15% of adults that haven't gotten even one shot? And 27% who aren't fully vaccinated? Whatever that term means, and that changes almost daily. But when comparing Trump and Biden, it's important to remember that for almost all of 2020, there were no vaccines at all. Is it better to be president of the United States at a time a novel virus comes to our shores that we know nothing about, don't know how to best treat, and have no vaccines for? Or to be president nearly a year later when vaccines have come online and we know much more? That's obvious what the answer is. Clearly, is the latter. Under Biden, 243 million people have received one dose of a vaccine. Up until the very end of 2020, 0 people had. As for uptake of vaccines, if Trump had won his second term, surely there would have been more Democratic suspicion about the vaccines than there are now. That's right. Kamala Harris was asked directly before the election, do you trust the vaccine? Because, it was developed under Trump, like he was there in the lab coat figuring it out. Kamala Harris didn't really answer the question, of course. Why would she? She says, well, I don't trust Donald Trump. So then when they won and got sworn in and there was vaccine hesitancy, they blamed those radical nut bars, the Trump supporters. Yeah, okay. Democrats' suspicion about the vaccines than there is now, and that presumably would have been blamed on him. But we are a big, varied continental country with a low level of trust in our institutions and authorities. We weren't, say, high trust Denmark when Trump was president, and we aren't Denmark now. In that convention speech, by the way, Biden promised, we'll develop and deploy rapid tests with results available immediately. In his COVID plan, he slammed Trump for testing shortages and pledged to implement widespread testing and tracing. Now that there's a shortage of rapid tests and enormous lines of people desperately seeking tests, Biden explained that the latest wave moved too fast to get in front of it. Whatever you think of this explanation, it's kind of the same. It's kind of thing Trump officials said at the outset of the pandemic. It goes to show that it's possible to be earnest and well-intentioned, as well as Biden allies believe he is, and you get caught flat-footed by the latest permutation in a once-in-a-century event. This is possibility that Biden and his supporters were never willing to admit existed while Trump was in office. No. And millions did not vote for Joe Biden. They voted against Donald Trump. And they screwed us all. But the problem is, admitting error, admitting fault, will never happen. Because 35% of the country, in my estimation, are brainwashed clones. Cult members, if you will. Zombies. It's unbelievable. They would never admit it. Unbelievable. The bureaucratic mistakes were never attributed to well-meaning people struggling with outdated systems and trying circumstances. The policy agreements never attributed to sincere differences about how best to try to get out of the pandemic and where the balance is struck between restrictions to control the virus and their inevitable downside. No, it's just all chucked up to near criminality. If this is the standard, Biden too has blood on his hands, of course, alleging that would be simplistic and absurd. Not that it stopped anyone when Trump was in charge. We are there's some Republicans that are a little hypocritical too, to be honest with you. But not to the scale of the Democrats. My God, my God. The hypocrisy, the lies, the deceit. All politicians lie or stretch the truth, depending on how you want to look at it. But some are just evil at it, period. They lied about the coronavirus. They lied about Russian collusion. They lied about a ton of stuff. And they knew it wasn't true. They used it as a weapon. And millions of people struggling as the virus hit the United States and businesses were closed and people's lives were ruined. And then when you add the rioting in the major cities all summer, that killed dozens and dozens of people and caused billions of dollars in damage. People just wanted to go back to normal. And they thought just plain old Uncle Joe, he's not the greatest in the world, but he will bring back normalcy. Well, it didn't happen, obviously, and it couldn't have. And that should be Trump's pretty much, instead of Make America Great Again, which is a great slogan, getting back to normalcy. Now, anybody, I'm sure it's on YouTube here somewhere, or some also social media sites or websites, is the speech from 1920, I believe, when the new president was sworn in, President Harding. His speech was about getting back to normal, getting back to a new, old normalcy, where people know where things are going, how the country is going. It was right after World War I, and things were just falling apart. And he called for a return to normalcy. That should be Trump's mantra. Or maybe we should use the old Ronald Reagan saying when the 2024 presidential election comes up. Are you better than you were 4 years ago? If not, then stop voting for the same party. But Trump will never get his apology. It will never happen. They'd rather die first than admit they were wrong. Because here's the thing. Conservative people like myself, center-right people, we just think the other side is stupid and misguided. The progressives think the other side, the conservatives, the Republicans, they think they're evil. And therein lies the problem. We'll see if the Republicans can fight back this coming year in the midterms and hopefully get a lot of the old neocon Republicans out of Congress and get some new America First people in Congress. That's the only way things are going to change. But I digress. Will he ever get his apology? Hell no. And I wouldn't hold my hand in my ass waiting either. Until next time, goodbye and good luck.